Okay, welcome back. We're talking about Gideon in the book of Judges, and this story has so often blessed me in so many ways. There's just so many steps that God has really spoken to me through, and I wanted to share some of those things with you. And in the first episode, I talked about the context of what's going on, and I think that's all really important. And so, if you haven't listened to that, please go back and listen to that. But I'm just going to move on today because Gideon is a really interesting guy. This is an amazing story because it's like, what would you do if God came to you and said, I want you to rescue the nation, right? This is a big goal. This is a frightening thing. And all he says is, I'll be with you. So just go do it. And Gideon is just like you and me, really, I think. I mean, he's totally freaked out by this. He asks for a sign. God gives it to him. The sign itself freaks him out. Like, he's just like, I'm going to die. This is so bad, right? And so what happens is, I'm going to skip forward to a moment where all the Midianites, so this is chapter 6, verse 33, and it says, all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Okay, so this is the problem, right? They keep wandering through Israel, making a mess of everything, destroying the crops, destroying the animals, and leaving Israel with nothing. They're just barely scraping by, barely making ends meet. Does that resonate with you? We've been there so many times, right? Just barely making ends meet. It doesn't feel like anything we do works. It feels like it's just such a grind, literally. In Gideon's case, that's where God met with him. He was threshing wheat. And this, verse 34, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. He blows his trumpet. He summons a bunch of people to follow him. He sends messengers throughout Manasseh, the tribe of Israel that he's from, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, another tribe, another in Zebulun and Naphtali. So all these tribes, he sends messengers out. Look, we are getting out from this oppression, right? And so they all join up and like, basically it goes from Gideon not wanting to do anything, being scared, and the Spirit of God comes on him, and he blows the trumpet and he sends out messengers. We're going to deal with this now. It's a line in the sand. This is it. No further. We're not going to stand for this any longer. And then he backs off again, right? Then he's like, oh, the doubt, the fear, the I don't know, was that really God who spoke to me? Was that sign really from God? I mean, he was so sure it was from God when it happened, but now he's like doubting again, right? You ever find yourself in that situation? I totally get that. And so he says, look, God, if I place some wool on the threshing floor, and then the next morning, if there's dew only on the fleece, okay, and the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said. Okay, so God says, okay, fine, right? And he does it. And in fact, the fleece is so wet, okay, that full of dew, that he wrings it out, and it's a bowl full of water. Now, I have never seen dew like that, right? I've seen dew, plenty of mornings. Now, I don't live in Israel, so I'm not sure if the environment is that different or whatever, but, I've seen dew on the grass, and things get damp for sure, but I've never wrung out that much water from something that's, damp from dew. So we have a pretty definite sign here that God is saying, yes, I'm going to do this. Just follow me. Just do what I'm asking you to do. But again, Gideon is afraid. He's not sure. He's doubting, right? And, and I can kind of get that, maybe there was a little rain that evening, that night, and he didn't maybe notice, right? And the rain, maybe it all pooled where the fleece was. And so that's why it was so wet. And then it dried up. You can start to talk yourself out of these things, right? You start to talk yourself out of it. You start to rationalize and think, well, maybe the fleece is so wet because it rained and I didn't notice the rain. I was pretty tired last night, and so maybe it rained early and then it dried up, and that's how this thinking goes, right? And so then he says, okay, just one more. And he even knows. He says, God, don't be angry with me. Let me just make one more request. Just let me just to help me out here. I want to just do the opposite test, right? So let's have the ground wet from dew and the fleece dry. And then I'll know. Then I'll really know, because I didn't really think this thing through, that the fleece might be wet from some rain or whatever. And then it says, that night God did so. Only the fleece was dry, all the ground was covered with dew. Isn't God gracious? Just so gracious. Like, just so gentle, so loving, so kind, so gracious. Like, it's at this point that people look at Gideon and say, you're pushing it too far, and we give Gideon a hard time. We give him a bad time. We say, look, you just don't have enough faith. Like, it's obvious earlier that God is speaking to you and calling you out, like, just go do it. And yet the thing is that, and while I agree with that Gideon didn't have enough faith, that the blessing in this story is that, isn't that pretty much how we all live our lives? Right? Like, isn't that how, that's how I feel all the time. It's like every single day I need another boost from God. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I have a calling. I'm moving forward, but I feel like, oh man, is that still true today? And so I appreciate this story a lot, because, yeah, you know what? I get it. I don't have, like, one dose of faith isn't enough. Okay? It's just not that easy. I wish that it was, but what I rest in here is that God is gracious. Like, he is so good to us. He's so good to Gideon. And I think that's the point. That's what I get out of this story, that even though Gideon asks for yet another sign and then another sign on top of that, God says, sure, yeah, okay, I can do that. And God does that, and we need to allow his voice to penetrate into our hearts, and we need to learn to listen for his voice, because I believe he is constantly reaffirming and guiding and giving us direction. And so as we sit in quiet, in meditation and in contemplation, we can hear his voice and know what he is saying and get that reassurance, right? That's the reassurance that, you know what, we as humans we crave that. And you know what? God knows that. God knows that, and he gives that to us. Yes, there's a whole complication about lack of faith and that he shouldn't be doing this and all that sort of thing. But what I draw from this story is that, you know what? God actually doesn't say anything. It's Gideon's own words that we're relying on here. God, please don't be angry. that suggests that God might be angry, but it doesn't say that, actually. God does it, and he says, and through that, he says, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. So go in peace today. God bless you. Please share, and I would really appreciate that. Thanks a lot, and we'll speak soon.